What is happening? Today we are here to do another player spotlight series on James Marshall Hendrix. That's right, the one and only Jimi Hendrix. Now, Jimmy was born November 27th, 1942 in Seattle, Washington. His parents, his dad's name was Al, his mother's name was Lucille. He had a pretty rough childhood, and his mother died in 1958, I do believe. He didn't see her much, didn't see his mother much. He didn't have much of a relationship. And he was turned on to guitar by Muddy Waters. And later in life, when Jimmy met Muddy Waters, Muddy saw him perform a few times before Jimmy got really big. And Muddy was quoted as saying, "He scares the shit out of me. And he should scare all of the other guitar players too." Jimmy was just very innovative, and he was a master at playing at humongous volume and controlling the feedback and chaos that comes along with being on a loud stage. Jimmy was completely self-taught on playing guitar, and of course, you guys know, he was left-handed, and he played a Fender Stratocaster upside down, like this. Can you imagine? I can't. I've tried it. It doesn't work. Not for me, but I'm no Jimi Hendrix. I mean, the guy had fingers about that long, and you know what they say about guys with really long fingers. They're good at guitar playing. My fingers are really short. That's always been one of my handicaps. I have little sausage fingers, but I do the best I can. In 1961, Jimmy joined the Army, the U.S. Army, and trained to be a paratrooper. And he was honorably discharged in 1962 after injuring his ankle in some sort of way during a parachute jump. And he still found music in, time for music when he was in the Army. After the Army, he actually worked under the name Jimmy James as a session player. And he played with guys like Little Richard, B.B. King, the Isley Brothers, and Sam Cooke, actually. They're all pretty big names back in the early 60s, mid-60s. They were pretty famous people. And Jimmy, later in life, after the Army, he was managed by Chaz Chandler of the Animals. The Animals, they did that song, House of the Rising Sun. I'm sure you've all heard it. But he actually was Jimi Hendrix's manager. And in 1966, James Marshall Hendrix, or Jimmy James, became Jimi Hendrix. And we all know what happened after that. Jimmy started a band called the Jimi Hendrix Experience, and with, who were the two guys? Noel Redding and Mitch Mitchell. He created a hell of a wave in the music industry. Jimmy was very innovative, and he used a lot of feedback, and he was one of the first guys to really use a lot of guitar effects. Excuse me, I'm just getting over the herpagonicyphilades, so my throat's a little scratchy. But he used a lot of effects in his guitar signal path. He used a fuzz face, an orbiter, a wah. He even used a Leslie, which is a rotating speaker made for an organ. He used, volume pedal, stuff like that. He was the first guy to really have a bunch of effects pedals and use them. It wasn't very popular up until that point, and even for some time afterward, didn't really catch on. The 70s is when effects really became popular. In 1969, Jimmy performed at Woodstock, the 3-day music festival, and he was the last performer to play, and probably his most famous performance. He started off with the Star Spangled Banner. It was a pretty crazy version of the song, and most everybody liked it, but there were a few uptight, red, white, and blue proud types that were a little bit offended that he did such a thing with our national anthem. To me, music's very personal, and if you want to go ahead and change music and make it your own, that's what it's for. That's what it's for, in my opinion. In late 1969, Jimmy was kind of bored of doing the Jimi Hendrix Experience, so he started a new band called the Band of Gypsies. with his Army buddy, Billy Cox, who was the bassist, and Billy Cox and I can't remember who the other guy was, so you'll have to forgive me. Put it in the comments if you know. I can't think of it right offhand, and I didn't write it down in my notes because I'd never remember most of this stuff if it weren't for notes. But anyway, they began working on a new album with the Jimi Hendrix Experience, or the Band of Gypsies. The band never really took off. It never really had a chance to. They did put out a little bit of material, but they started creating a new album, rumored to be named First Rays of the New Rising Sun. And sadly, the world never got to hear that album because Jimi Hendrix passed away September 18th, 1970 in Notting Hill, London, in the United Kingdom. Now, his father, Al, managed Jimmy's estate after his passing, and he even had a museum dedicated to Jimi Hendrix there for a while. And Jimmy's life was pretty crazy. You know, he did a lot of drugs, and his guitars were quite often pawned for money or what have you. And, you know, before a gig, he'd often say, geez, I don't have a guitar, and they'd have to run out and find him one. I don't know if the guitar manufacturers even did sponsorships back then. Not sure. But he had a pretty interesting life, and if you have anything to do with guitar, Jimi Hendrix has inspired you in some way, because most of the rock players today wouldn't play the way they do without guys like Jimi Hendrix, Eddie Van Halen. Eddie Van Halen was another game changer, but that's for another episode, maybe. Anyway, let's talk about some Jimi Hendrix riffs, shall we? Because that's what we do here, right? The first one we're going to talk about is one of his most famous riffs. Now, everything Jimmy did just about was in E-flat tuning, which is a half step down from E standard. Let me fix some things here. There we go. I had to turn my monitors the other way, because if not, they just cut my ears off, especially with a Strat. Strat's a little harsh. This is one of Jimmy's most famous riffs, and like I said, he played everything in an E-flat tuning, just about everything. But this is one of his most famous riffs right here. Let's put a little bit more dirt on that, right? Jimmy used a lot of fuzz. He used a fuzz face. I don't have a fuzz face, so I'm using an OCD. But it goes like this. Heard that song. It's still played on the radio, and it's been used in all kinds of TV shows, movies, all kinds of crazy stuff. A lot of these songs that we're going to be talking about today are Jimmy's most iconic riffs, just ones that really inspired me as a teenager to want to learn how to play guitar, and we're going to move right along. Now the next one, Voodoo Child, crazy riff. The guy was an amazing guitar player. And I'm going to do my best to recreate these, but it's not going to sound quite like Jimmy, because he was awesome. And I don't have 7-inch fingers. Voodoo Child goes like this. get the idea. Jimmy was a master at using the wah pedal, and he used it quite a bit. I guess sitting in front of his amps would have probably been pretty painful. I used about 5 or 6 100-watt Marshalls, and back then, the amp companies didn't really have the distortion channels built into them yet. There wasn't any gain stage built into the amp, so the only way to get any gain besides having a fuzz pedal was to just dime it out and crank the whole thing up as loud as it would go. And I can imagine sitting in front of them amplifiers would just about chop your head right off. The next song I want to talk about, Manic Depression. It starts off like this. I started right into the riff, but it actually starts like this. Pretty cool tune. That's one of Jimmy's simpler compositions. He was all self-taught, but he had a hell of an imagination when it came to writing guitar riffs. And he did a really, really good job. I say really, really a lot, don't I? But he did an awesome job at playing both rhythm and lead. He just a really well-rounded guitar player. The next song I want to talk about, pretty cool song here. This one I think was actually recorded in standard tuning. Wind Cries Mary goes like this. Oops. Jimmy did a lot of hammer-ons underneath his notes, and just gave him a really unique style. And I always really respected him for the way he took the guitar and took it a complete different direction than anybody had done before that. Like I said earlier, Eddie Van Halen kind of did the same thing in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s. Now the next one I want to talk about, this song's been all over the radio. It's done by several guys. Hey Joe. Favorite songs. They play it a lot. That's one you hear quite a bit still on the radio. Not sure what it's about, but he talks about a guy going down and shooting his old lady for messing around with another man. All us guys can identify with that, right? Well, the next one got a pretty crazy intro to it. I'll do my best, but it's not going to sound like Jimmy. guess what song I'm playing. Pretty innovative guy, Jimmy was. He just, to be somebody that's completely self-taught, be able to come up with all these ideas and take them and turn them into a song, it's not easy to do, especially for a left-handed guy playing a guitar upside down. Anyway, one more song we're going to talk about, and this is probably my favorite Jimi Hendrix song of all time, Spanish Castle Magic. And I'm going to screw this up really bad, but it's going to be all right. Told you. Fun one to play. But anyway, guys, I just wanted to talk to you about another one of my guitar heroes, Jimi Hendrix. Go listen to some Jimi Hendrix. He's got all kinds of good stuff out there. I wish you guys had a great weekend. I hope you had a great weekend anyway. Thanks for watching another Player Spotlight series. Be sure to hit that like button and go ahead and subscribe to my channel because you got nothing better to do. And until next time, see ya!